this Tuesday night, schools and cell phones. A new year brings new rules for students, no longer left to their own devices.
If they don't comply, they're going to get sent to the principal's office.
What Canada can learn from other countries about dialing down the distraction. Shots fired. Shocking video shows a popular musician's BC home under attack. Gig worker minimum wage. One province's new rules raising prices and wait times for Uber customers. Plus, a strange noise in outer space.
It almost did sound like a sonar.
The rampant speculation and scientific explanation.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Thousands of students across the country went back to school today, and depending on where you live, the new year comes with new rules. Schools in Ontario, Alberta and BC are now the latest to ban cell phones in the classroom, bringing those provinces in line with most of the rest of the country, where phones must be powered off and out of sight for most of the day. As Heather Yourex-West reports, Canadian schools are taking a lesson from other countries.
It's a last-minute text before the morning bell, as students in much of the country start a new school year with new rules about their cell phones.
Grades 6 and under cannot have their phone, and grades 7 and up can only have it during lunch hours, and if they don't comply, they're going to get sent to the principal's office.
While the details vary across the country, for most students, when they're in class, their phones aren't.
There's a consistent policy throughout every school district in every school so that the children can access education and concentrate on education.
Actually, I agree with it because cell phone for me is like, kind of distraction for them as well. So I was encouraging my son not to take cell phones.
For some, the new rules will mean a big change, the devices seemingly in every hand.
It's not uncommon for kids, even in school, to be on games or gaming for 3 or 4 hours a day during the school period. And what we do know is that there's a strong and striking association with increased risk for mental illness, increased risk for cyberbullying.
Which is why putting a stop to their use in schools is slowly becoming the global norm. Italy started banning them in 2007. France, Spain, the Netherlands, Australia, China. Almost 1 in 4 countries around the world, in fact, have already banned them in the classroom. Here in Canada, governments in almost every province and territory now have policies in place.
We expect these first couple of weeks to be one where we focus more on education proactively with students.
Helping students break free from what for some has become a digital addiction.
It's going to be a bummer, but you can't really do anything.
A new school year, cell phone free. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
As Heather mentioned, school cell phone bans are fast becoming the norm worldwide. The new rules driven in part by concerns about screen time and mental health. Take a look at these figures. Beginning around 2010, as social media was taking off, there was a sudden and sharp change in the mental health of teens and younger adults. In Canada, it fell off a cliff, with men, and especially women under 30, reporting dramatic declines in their mental health. And it's not just Canada. Other developed English-speaking countries are seeing similar patterns. This chart shows the U.S., where rates of depression among teens have skyrocketed. And new guidelines from Sweden's health authority say children under the age of 2 should not be exposed to any screens whatsoever, and that kids between 2 and 5 should be limited to a maximum of 1 hour of screen time per day. France has similar recommendations and is now trialing a complete ban on phones in 200 French schools with more than 50,000 students. In the U.S., the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends screen time should be very limited for children younger than 2. We're now learning the identity of the 15-year-old boy shot and killed by police in Alberta on Friday. A statement from the family, provided by a band counselor from the Samson Cree Nation, identifies the victim as Hoss Lightning. His community issued 5 recommendations, including the immediate resignation of the RCMP officers involved and a transparent and accountable investigation that keeps Samson Cree Nation informed. The RCMP says the teen called 911 for help, claiming that people were trying to kill him. Officers say the caller was found just north of the First Nation with several weapons, which were then confiscated. Police say there was a confrontation and 2 officers fired their guns. Alberta's police watchdog is now overseeing the investigation. And another 15-year-old, Mario Giddings, was shot and killed in Toronto last night, just steps from a police station. Investigators believe multiple shots were fired from a vehicle in this parking lot in the city's north end just before 8 o'clock. So far, there are no details about possible suspects nor motive. It capped a deadly long weekend in Toronto with 11 separate shootings across the city. 3 people were killed. Shocking video has emerged of a brazen shooting early Monday morning at the Vancouver Island home of a high-profile South Asian singer. Take a look at this video that appears to show the gunman's vantage point as they unleash multiple rounds at AP Dillon's house. A pickup truck can also be seen in flames in the driveway. The sun came up to reveal the damage. The home riddled with bullet holes, fire marks on the driveway, and a caved-in garage door. India media is now reporting that an Indian gang has claimed responsibility. Global News is unable to verify that information, but BC officials say a multi-provincial investigation is now underway.
What I can tell you is that police are taking this very seriously. They're working very hard, not only here in BC and Alberta and Ontario, but at the national level as well, where it's coordinated from.
Police say they evacuated the home, but wouldn't specify how many people were inside. No injuries were reported, with police adding they don't believe that there's a risk to the general public. AP Dillon took to social media last night, telling his millions of followers that he and his people are safe. In Ukraine, at least 51 people were killed in a Russian ballistic missile attack on Poltava. More than 200 others were injured, and there are fears more may be buried in the debris. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin spent the day in Mongolia, the first time a member nation of the International Criminal Court has hosted Putin since the court ordered him arrested last year. He's now departed for home. Eric Sorensen reports on the message his visit sends and what Ukraine says it needs to strike back.
It was a devastating strike on a military academy and a nearby hospital in Poltava. More than 50 were killed by 2 ballistic missiles from Russia, one of the most deadly Russian strikes of the war. Russia's ability to hit targets almost anywhere, like this hotel in Zaporizhia overnight, underscores Ukraine's frustration at not being able to strike back at targets in Russia. As Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky described the scene in Poltava, he has also repeatedly asked for long-range weapons from the West. U.S. President Biden was asked last night about lifting restrictions, but with American concerns about nuclear escalation, Biden has not approved so far the use of long-range weapons. Ukraine wants to inflict more damage in Russia. Much of eastern Ukraine remains occupied by Russian forces, and while Ukraine has seized territory in the Kursk region, most of its weapons, like HIMARS missiles, can only reach a limited distance into Russia. Many Russian air bases and other military targets are out of reach. Ukraine wants long-range missiles that can travel up to 300 kilometers, and it wants permission to use them.
Targeting these air bases in Russia basically signaled to Russia that it would be too costly and it would be difficult to continue attacking Ukraine's cities.
Vladimir Putin sent another message today, 5,000 kilometers from the front lines. He visited Mongolia, the first time a member nation of the International Criminal Court has allowed Putin to visit since the war began. The ICC has issued an arrest warrant for Putin for attacking Ukraine, but the priority for Mongolia's president is a pipeline energy deal with Putin.
In theory, Putin should have been arrested the moment that he arrived. I think Putin wants to show that he is still an international player.
For the U.S. and Russia, potential escalation is a nuclear balancing act. For Ukraine, delays in getting advanced weapons is costing Ukrainian lives. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The British government is defending its decision to suspend some arms sales to Israel due to what it calls possible violations of international humanitarian law. The move being described by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as shameful. British military sales to Israel are just a fraction of what the country receives from its other powerful allies, fueling criticism that the UK isn't going far enough. Redmond Shannon reports on whether Canada will follow suit.
The latest deadly Israeli airstrike to hit Gaza, almost 11 months into the conflict between Israel and Hamas. A new UK government assessment is now suspending some arms exports of British-made components to Israel.
There does exist a clear risk that they might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law.
Suspending 30 of its 350 arms export licenses to Israel for items the UK says are used for offensive purposes.
We remain a staunch ally of Israel. We've made this legal judgment as a result of the process we're required to follow.
The move has attracted criticism, coming just days after Israel recovered the bodies of 6 hostages from Gaza.
In the face of intense political pressure, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called it a shameful decision, adding that the move would only embolden Hamas.
What is the symbolism? What does the timing say? And I think that the symbolism of the timing is really deeply inappropriate.
But others, including Amnesty International, say the ban does not go far enough. It doesn't include any British-made components for the modern F-35 fighter jet, which is used by Israel to bomb targets in Gaza. Some components of the F-35 are Canadian-made, sent to the US for assembly. Global Affairs Canada says there are no valid permits for lethal components sent to Israel. Canada has not approved new arms export permits to Israel since January, but permits approved before then remain in effect. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
The World Health Organization says it has vaccinated more than 160,000 children in Gaza in just 2 days. That beats the UN's initial target by about 10,000 doses. The campaign continues for another 10 days and relies on daily pauses in the fighting between Israel and Hamas in specific areas. A trade fight is escalating between Canada and China after Ottawa announced it's slapping a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles. As expected, Beijing is now retaliating, taking steps to block imports of Canadian canola. David Akin explains what the trade feud could mean for Canada's farmers and economy.
This is one more thing we're going to deal with that comes out of left field that is just a frustration.
After fighting drought and dealing with rail strikes, Canada's canola farmers now worry about China retaliating after Ottawa decided to protect the auto and steel sector by blocking imports of cheaper Chinese electric vehicles.
A political decision on the other side of the world has a direct impact on our bottom line.
China, for now, is only investigating Canadian canola producers for alleged illegal imports, but many believe the investigation is a mere formality ahead of a major disruption to Canada's China-bound canola trade worth about $5 billion a year.
Our priority is focused on how do we maintain, restore open and predictable market access for canola, which is really our top priority.
The federal government is ready to help.
We have programs inside Agriculture Canada to help farmers that find themselves, with a low commodity price.
Nonetheless, some farmers will have to choose this winter between planting canola next spring or going with another crop.
As it plays out, we're not going to try to grow a crop that we're going to lose money on. And so we would pull those canola acres. But canola is a vital part of our rotation.
China's done this before. Back in 2019, China was angry at Canada for arresting Huawei's Meng Wanzhou and took it out on Canadian canola producers with restrictions on imports. That lasted 3 years and cost about $2 billion a year in lost export revenue. Jeff.
David Akin in Ottawa. Thanks, David. Major changes for gig workers in BC. Coming up, their new minimum wage and the cost to consumers. In a Canadian first, BC is now introducing new regulations for gig workers aimed at improving pay and working conditions for those behind the wheels of Uber, DoorDash, and Skip the Dishes, among others. The province has introduced a minimum wage along with other key changes, all rolling out today. But as Neethu Garcha reports, some drivers are skeptical about the impact on their daily grind.
For those ride-hailing and food delivery drivers navigating the roads with Uber, DoorDash, Skip the Dishes, and Lyft, new regulations are now in effect with a minimum wage of $20.88 per hour.
We are struggling. We used to make like in 8 hours. I can't even make now in 12 hours.
For an estimated 46,000 gig workers in BC, these regulations mandate a minimum vehicle allowance of 35 to 45 cents per kilometre, and drivers will be registered for workers' compensation. But some Metro Vancouver Uber drivers say these changes are unlikely to make much difference to their bottom line, highlighting the focus on engaged hours, the time they spend on assignment.
We were asking for the non-engaged time, the whole time.
In a statement, Uber said it's adding a new $2 fee on delivery orders to help offset these new pay and mileage expense rates. Customers will be prompted to tip, while drivers will now be provided the drop-off location and their earnings before accepting the trip, resulting in longer wait times for riders.
After a gig worker minimum wage law was implemented in Seattle this year, Uber Eats reported a 30% decrease in order volumes and longer driver wait times. DoorDash has spent more than $1 million lobbying to overturn it.
Is BC looking, one, to learn any lessons? Two, are they doing this because they need some political popularity rather than sound economics?
I'm confident that these changes will work for the companies. I'm confident that the workers also will feel that their basic rights are protected here.
As BC steps into this new regulatory landscape, millions of gig economy workers across the country will be watching closely. Neethu Garcha, Global News, Surrey, BC.
Deadly disaster still ahead. Overcrowding is being blamed for a jailbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo. A boat carrying dozens of migrants ripped apart in the English Channel today, killing at least 12 people, mostly women and children. Everyone on board was thrown over, many without life jackets. About 65 people were rescued, 2 are still unaccounted for. The boat was trying to reach Britain from France. It's believed to be the deadliest migrant disaster in the busy Channel this year. And more than 120 people are dead following an attempted prison break in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The country's interior minister says most were killed during a stampede, with dozens more injured. As Mike Armstrong reports, the incident has renewed criticism over the government's management of the notorious Makala prison. And a warning, some of the images in this report are disturbing.
Images shared on social media show the carnage left after the prison break. Dozens of bodies strewn on the ground, collected and carted away. According to the Congolese Prime Minister, 59 inmates were injured, 129 were killed. Cause of death for most, he says, suffocation in a stampede. 24 were shot by security forces. This local resident says he was woken by gunshots and people knew quickly what was going on. Amina Mwacha is a journalist with Digital Congo in Kinshasa. The prison, she says, has a bad reputation and a severe overcrowding problem. The Makala facility was built in the 1950s to hold 1,500 prisoners. It now holds about 15,000. There was a prison break in 2017 where about 4,000 prisoners escaped. This time, officials say no one got out. This man says people want the prison moved, but it's too close to where people live. The government is also facing renewed criticism about the conditions in the prison. These are images taken this summer. Amnesty International says there are shortages of food, medicine, and drinking water. There is also criticism of the country's legal system. Only about 6% of the prisoners in the Makala facility are serving sentences. Most haven't had their trial yet and are simply waiting. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
unsettling sound. Up next, the weird space noise that threw Starliner astronauts for a loop. Welcome back. A big sigh of relief at NASA Mission Control today after some strange sounds appeared to come from inside Boeing's beleaguered Starliner capsule. It's been carrying 2 American astronauts stranded in space for 8 months. Heidi Petracek reports on the speculation and explanation.
Houston, we have a problem.
Whether it's in Hollywood movies like Apollo 13 or real-life space situations, when astronauts contact Mission Control, we tend to assume it's bad news.
So NASA has a feed of all of their communications to the space station back and forth, and sometimes I just have it on in the background.
That's how space buff and meteorologist Rob Dale in Lansing, Michigan, heard stranded Starliner astronaut Barry Butch Wilmore on the International Space Station contact Houston Control. And an eerie sound caused Dale's ears to perk up.
It was a pinging. It almost did sound like a sonar.
Dale put the recording online.
There's a strange noise coming through the speaker.
Houston couldn't hear it at first, but then...
All right, Butch, that one came through. It was kind of like a pulsing noise, almost like a sonar ping.
All right, over to you. Tell us if you figure it out.
Speculation erupted on social media. Retired Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield posting the sound was one, quote, he'd prefer not to hear inside my spaceship. All as Boeing has dominated headlines for Starliner's long list of technical problems. But NASA quickly explained it was simply speaker feedback.
You've got a pretty sophisticated set of audio channels up on the International Space Station. And so what NASA has said is basically there was kind of interference crosstalk between one channel and another channel.
NASA says the sound has stopped. It still plans to bring the Starliner back to Earth minus its crew later this week. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is the Paris Paralympic podium. Ontario's Katie Cosgriff finished third in the women's S10 100-meter butterfly. And BC's Cody Forney won the men's T51 200-meter sprint today, a dominating performance and the fastest of his wheelchair racing career. Canada now has 13 Paralympic medals and counting. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.